Equity in the math classroom, teaching equity in an equitable math class. My problem statement is how can I create an equitable math class? Core values. To find my core values, I went through an extensive reflection process. I asked myself questions regarding my teaching practice. The first guiding question, which started my journey in finding my core values, was, what is really important to me as an educator? The answer? To prepare my students for the world outside the classroom. How would I ready my students for the world outside the classroom? In turn, I asked myself two more questions, which my core values stemmed from. First, I reflected. My self-reflection was, I can prepare my students for the outside classroom by teaching them enduring understandings. And the question was, what are the enduring understandings I want my students to take away from my teachings? The answer? Teaching my students are globally, environmentally, and morally responsible citizens. So the core values that came from that is social justice, being an environmentally and responsible citizen, and me, a teacher as a moral educator. My second self-reflection was I can better prepare my students for the world outside the classroom by knowing my learners and providing them with the knowledge of how to use the tools available for them. The question is, how can I better know my students? How can I differentiate? And how can I create a better growth mindset? The answer? Creating an equitable math class through providing opportunity with differentiation and choice, as well as creativity to keep students engaged and feel comfortable when using the manipulatives and math aids available for the students, using universal design as well. My core values that stem from those is equity, creativity, and providing choice. My goal as a teacher is to create a safe, nurturing, supportive, and equitable space for my students to explore their individual learning opportunities through choice and creativity. This can be accomplished through implementing meaningful inquiry-based projects that can be applicable to their own lives and/or the real world. Choice is important for students as this fosters their individuality and independence in learning.
Topic and problem. Two areas of concern which I found the most applicable to my own interests as well as applicable to my students' overall growth was, number one, solving the issue of creating equity within the math class, making sure that math is engaging and accessible to all levels of learners and applicable to their learning styles, and number two, guiding students through finding the correct information about world events and in turn becoming globally, environmentally, and morally aware responsible citizens. In my first placement, I noticed that the students were very interested in equity. The students were working on social justice issues and social studies, and the topic often came up about world events in the classroom. They were unaware of where to find the answers to their questions. I strive to help students navigate the current social justice issues present in today's world, and in turn become globally conscious citizens. In this placement, I also noticed that students were unaware of manipulatives in math that were available to them, and if they were made available to them, they were unsure on if they were able to use it, as there was a continuous stigma with manipulatives. This math aids or manipulative stigma needs to be broken through universal design. Anyone should be able to use these math aids and manipulatives in math to help their progress in learning. They should feel comfortable and confident using them to help them with learning math.
Rationale. This topic of creating an equitable classroom, both in means of reaching all learners and teaching students to become globally, environmentally, and morally responsible citizens, is important as we're teaching the future generation citizens. We're not just teaching students to pass a test. We should be teaching students how to become responsible citizens of the world. We have the duty as teachers, educators, moral educators, and teachers local apprentice to prepare our students for the world outside the classroom. Our students should be creating enduring understandings as citizens who, when given the tools and taught through equitable teaching, can navigate the world using math. Math is in our everyday lives is a necessary function within our society. Many students do not see the real-life application of math. But if they can see these real-life applications and connections, then they can learn not just math skills, but life skills. For example, many people still have difficulty calculating tip. But with the application of my second interest, the global citizenship, we can go deeper than just calculating tip. Teaching students to see trends in data, such as referring to my first reviewed literature review, they ask a question such as, what causes some countries to have such high infant mortality rates? By taking this inquiry approach, students are able to create inquiry-based questions based on real-life issues and solve problems and become aware. This allows them to develop critical thinking and problem solving. This is more engaging than learning textbook memorization math and in turn making meaningful math. These areas of concern and topics relate to me as I struggled a lot with math when I was in school. I did not connect with the abstract textbook and formulaic math. I strive to create positive experiences with math for my students, and this is why it is important to create interesting and meaningful math. After reflecting on my own experiences as a student and currently as a teacher, I then narrowed down my core values based on these areas of concern. This led to the topic and problem. Research questions. Once I narrowed down my 2 areas of interest, as well as my core values stemming from those areas, I then needed to narrow down my research questions. The core values I had summarized helped me realize the topics that were most relatable and applicable to me. The first area of interest is making an equitable math class. How can I make an equitable math class where students of all learning styles and learning abilities are engaged and feel comfortable using the manipulatives available to them? How can I provide choice and opportunity for making math fun and applicable to the lives of my students? The second area of interest is globally, environmentally, and responsible citizens. How can I create math lessons to prepare my students to become globally, environmentally, and morally aware and responsible citizens? When I was looking for peer-reviewed articles on the above, I realized I can combine these both areas of interest when I found my first peer-reviewed article, Critical Mathematics Education, Extending the Borders of Mathematics Teacher Education, written by Tracy Gordon Epsley, Narimula Naresh, and Lisa Poling. Research question. After combining both of the questions above, I created one finalized summarized question of how can I create an equitable math class? Equitable in the way of presenting the world's issues of globally, environmentally, and morally aware responsible citizens, as well as equitable in the way that all students are being met, needs will be met by allowing choice, creativity, so that students feel comfortable using the math aids available to them. In turn, students will also see the practical use of the math skills applied in real-life situations, also making math meaningful. Definitions of terms. Equity. Equity is measuring a fairness and opportunity. In my action research plan, the term is used both in regarding to giving each student a fair opportunity to learn math and then showing their learned knowledge. And the second definition of equity is teaching equity through teaching about the inequities in the world, teaching the students to become global citizens. Global citizenship. Global citizenship, or being globally responsible citizen, is often highlighted in the social studies subject, but should be highlighted more than just this subject. To be a global citizen, you are aware of the world's issues and inequities, and in turn taking action on these issues. These issues may fall under the area of social justice and/or environmental awareness. Definition of terms: enduring understandings. Enduring understandings are the knowledge that students take beyond the classroom and are the building blocks which students use for future learning. Learning styles. Learning styles is the preferred mode of learning. This mode of learning is the way in which the instruction or information is being presented, such as visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetic. Situated learning. Situated learning describes the way in which learning is linked to the situation or context in which it takes place. In my action research statement, situation learning refers to the connection the learning made in the math classroom to real-life situations or contexts in the students' lives or the real world.
Preliminary Literature Review Introduction. There's a wealth of information on this topic available on the internet regarding this issue. Wading through the information available on this topic could be difficult, as the purpose of this course is to conduct a selective literature review, which means that I must be precise when choosing the most relevant pieces of research, but not only to provide context for my work, but also use to support my findings. With this being said, I think that even if this issue has been researched, it is different each time a new researcher takes a look into this issue. It is still applicable and still useful considering I'm applying it to my own practice. Preliminary Literature Review Number 1. As mentioned above, my first literature resource was the Critical Mathematics Education Extending the Boards of Mathematics Teacher Education, written by Tracy Gordon-Epsey, Nirmala Naresh, and Lisa Poling. This article looked at making math more of a subject, which is a vessel for teaching much greater things than just how to add and subtract. Mathematics education and instruction needs to be constructed so that individuals may develop both cognitive and social understandings of their world. This is a quote from the article. This directly relates to my second part of my action research question regarding creating an enduring understanding, teaching students to become global citizens. Another quote from this article, which I feel is applicable, is, "Yet mathematics is woven within all aspects of our world and should be taught and engaged with through the lens of a more global perspective." This article applies to my action research plan in that it looks at student-centered learning and teaching with the lens of global citizenship. The questions the students created for their own student-centered inquiry in this research article use math in the real-world context. Allowing for students to create their own inquiry questions enables creativity and a focus in individual interests while learning to problem solve independently. The students can then access different tools for learning. This way, students of many learning styles can be engaged. These math inquiries also dealt with the topic of social justice and equity, which in part is part of teaching students to be environmentally, globally, and moral responsible citizens. Preliminary Literature Review Number 2. For my second literature resource, I chose to review the examination of the relationship between 8th grade students' learning styles and the attitudes towards mathematics, written by Benjamin Adin. In this article, Adin delved into determining whether the attitudes towards math class and their learning styles had a correlation between grade 8 classrooms. I found this interesting considering the great amount of work that we had done on growth mindset and math class this year, specifically in modules. There is a common conception that there is such thing as a math person, and the statement students may say is, "I am not a math person." A quote from this article, which I feel is applicable to this, is, "Math class is seen as hard and boring by students, and a lesson which is hard to teach, to which students' interest is low." My goal is to break the stereotype. I want to show students that everyone can be a math person, as it is everywhere in our everyday lives. Through my lessons, students will learn how math is useful outside the classroom. Math may be made easier to understand if students delve into the information in which all learners are met.